Okay, so it's 11:02. I think it's time that we start. I want to welcome everybody. John, are you on the phone? Not yet. I'm hoping you can hear me. Deb or somebody, you want to take it off mute just for a second to make sure that everyone can hear me and let me know?
Yep, I got you, Lori. It's Deb.
Perfect. All right, so once again, welcome everybody. We're excited to share this information with you. So we appreciate you joining our call. And again, if you come on and off for any reason, please remember just to mute the call. So today's presentation is...
That room office over there is the whole...
So I'll just remind you one more time to mute your phone. Thank you. We're going to go through some information, and then at the end of the call, we're going to have a Q&A. On the call with me from my staff is Deb Stout and Jan Hepler. They are the individuals you probably most speak to when you're working with Great Lakes Marketing on child-resistant package testing. They've been here for 9 and 13 years respectively, so they have lots of insights to share with you. And on the call today is John Boja, or shortly will be John Boja, who will be answering questions at the end of the call, and John is from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. So we will do a quick welcome, which we already did. Another reminder about keeping your phone on mute. I'm going to go through the testing procedures and the package preparation, and then we'll have some Q&A. So today we are focusing just about the protocol testing for child-resistant packages. We also do label comprehension and human factor research, but those will not be included in today's presentation. So as a reminder, the Poison Prevention Packaging Act is designed to protect children from serious personal injury or serious illness resulting from handling, using, or ingesting hazardous household substances. I've highlighted in red the hazardous household substances because the key phrase for us is that if the distribution channel for this product is that it is intended for the home, then these regulations do not apply. If there's a reasonable expectation that the packaging will end up in the home and be purchased through consumer channels, then it is important that you be in child-resistant packaging. Also, for clarification, and because we have to do the certificates, it is important to know that this discussion is about 16 CFR 1700. It is very similar to the international standards, but it is not the same. And when you're referencing 16 CFR 1700, the 1700.15 is actually the standard that you have to meet, and .20 is actually the testing procedure. So within conversation and when you're labeling things on your certificate, you're going to be referring that it meets the standards using these particular protocols. So special packaging is packaging that's designed or constructed to be significantly difficult for children under 5 years of age to open or obtain a toxic or harmful amount of substance contained therein within a reasonable amount of time, and it's not difficult for normal adults to use. So this is the definition of the special packaging. To prove that this can happen, or to prove that something is special packaging and safe for children, they've defined children under 5 very specifically as about 3.5 to 4.25 years of age. It's actually by the month, and those children are typically found in daycare centers or nursery schools. And the thinking is that they're at the age where they might be physically able to open a package, but mentally they're not smart enough to know that something could be harmful inside of that package. The toxic or harmful amount is defined usually within your company, but it is the amount of which would be harmful to a child. This is most relevant if you have single-use or unit dose packaging, because the failure rate is determined by the toxicity level. And then being reasonable and not difficult for normal adults, that is why they have the senior-friendly testing, and we define normal as any adult who is able to successfully use regular packaging. On our website, you can see that if you go to the child resistant part and you click the read more, all of the regulations are there. So 16 CFR 1700 has a link. The ISO and EN standards and Canadian standards are also there for packages. And then lighters, we also have the regulations for lighters. If you have a gas container, then that is a different regulation, and that's the, and we're going to put that on our website, but there is a different regulation for gas cans. And then there will be added to this video presentation, so if somebody else in your company wants to listen in later, you can go online and grab it. So let's talk about child-resistant protocol testing. So getting ready to do the testing, there are some decisions that have to be made. First of all, you have the package preparation, and we encourage the use of placebo because, first of all, it allows the senior to open, remove some placebo, and close. It is not required, but it is helpful for testing. It's also very important in a unit dose that there be placebo, because in the cavity itself, if there is a tablet that is the same size and density of the actual tablet that will be in there, it's important that the cavity is filled. The torque has to match the online torque of what your production facility is, and the purpose for this is to replicate how the package will be in the marketplace. So that's what's most important there. Getting ready in the process, we will talk to you about the torque. We will ask you what it is. If we torque it for you, we will record when we torque it and the range at which we torque it, etc. But it has to be documented in the report. There's also the concept of cycling. So packages that are intended for multiple use often go through a cycling process before they're tested. The goal of this is to open and close the package a reasonable number of times that replicate the expected number of openings based on the number of doses that might be in the package or if a package is reused. So the cycling is the act of opening and closing it correctly to give it the appropriate amount of wear, so that it represents child-resistant features throughout the entire life of the product. And then, of course, the opening directions. It's very important that the opening directions that we show the senior adult match what will be used in the marketplace. And, of course, it's obvious that if it's going to be used in the marketplace at a certain font size or coloration or graphic, the exact same graphics, font, and wording must be used when we test it. There might be times when you're in the development stage and the directions are not available to be put on the package yet, but we would need to show them on a separate piece of paper, and they have to be really representative of what would be on the package when you're at that point in the production. Timing, it usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks to do the full child resecuring panel, which would be the adult panel and the child panel. It's slower in the summertime because the children are not in their child care centers. And sometimes it's faster in the fall when we have lots of children and everybody's back at school. But give yourself enough time to start it, to maybe make any edits and go back and finish or restart testing if something goes wrong. But we prefer that you give everybody enough time to get it done fully and correctly. On the deliverables, we provide a report that includes all of the information required in the standard. We will also give you the data collection forms that have notes and the appropriate signatures, and the consent forms that have the signature of the senior adult. All of those are for you to keep. If you need them, it's important that you have all of it because it shows that the testing was done fully and correctly. So let's start with the child panel. As we talk, I'm going to explain that you have to meet 2 thresholds. It has to be child resistant and senior friendly. So we'll start with how we determine if a package is child resistant. So the child panel is composed of children who are 42 to 51 months of age. And the CPSC has created quite a complex formula to make sure you know exactly how old the children are. But the nice thing here is when these children are 3.5 to 4 1/4 years of age. They're easily found at preschools and child care centers. And by having the panel so well defined, it creates a high level of reliability or repetition, so that panels of 50 tested in Toledo or elsewhere pretty much are representative of what's going to happen across the U.S. and between the different schools. The panel is 50% male, 50% female. Children are allowed to test 2 different packages in their testing lifetime. So in the 10-month span, when they're 42 to 51 months of age, they can test 2 different packages. The ASTM stands for the association that classifies the different child-resistant features on a package. So we will ask you to help us define your package using the ASTM classifications. That way we know whether or not we can use that same child for a different package. But for example, a push and turn is different than the align the arrow, or a bend and peel might be different than a scissor kind of opening on unit dose. More regulations to make sure that the research is reliable is that we have to use several sites, we have to use several testers, and of course, we have to find children that can last for 10 minutes without needing to take a potty break, because the test takes a full 10 minutes. When it starts, we have our children seated and we hand them the packages and we say, please try to open this for me. Of course, there's no demonstration at this point, they're just handed the package. We time them for 5 minutes. The only conversation is just to encourage them to keep working if for some reason they stop. After the full 5 minutes, we ask them to stop working on their package. We say to them, watch me open my package, and we give them a demonstration. It's important that we do not do anything other than visually show the package. We don't say anything to them. They're given back their packages, and we say, now you try to open your package. We also must offer them, you can use your teeth if you want to. This makes a lot of people cringe, but the reason why we make the statement is the assumption that possibly if the children were home alone and unsupervised, they might be tempted to use their mouth. So they're giving the child every opportunity to access the package. We give them a second 5 minutes, and then of course we give them a grandma lecture to make sure that they are smart enough to know that this was a special experience and that they should never touch packages like this in their home, and that packages might have things in them that are dangerous. It's important to note that we have the first 5-minute test period and the second 5-minute test period. The reason for that is the pass-fail criteria are based on access to the package in the first 5 minutes and in the second 5 minutes. So when you look at this chart, it seems a little overwhelming, but it is split into pass, continue, and fail criteria based on the first 5 minutes and the second 5 minutes. So all of our data are collected in 2 bundles. Just to explain it a little bit further, you can have a panel of 50 children, and if you are in the pass range of 0 to 3 children being able to access a toxic amount in that first 5 minutes, then you'd be in the pass range. You can have as many as 5 children open it totally between the first and second periods and still be able to pass. However, if after 50 children you are in the continue range for either the first or second 5-minute threshold, then we would test 100 children. And we can continue this up to 200 children. And you notice that the number of failures increases up to the point where you can pass at 80% and still be considered child resistant. It's very important, again, to focus on the issue of child resistancy, that a package is perceived and defined as child resistant as long as 80% of the children are kept out of the contents. Deb and Jan wanted to make sure that I said that when you're getting up to about 150 children, if you're still teetering in that just barely passing and you want to keep going to 200, the comments from them is that after so many years of doing this, it's pretty obvious that if you're not passing at least 80% at any threshold, you really are probably going to have trouble passing the test. Each panel of 50 is balanced for age and gender and tester site, and tester quantities, etc. So they're very reproducible. So the chances of you having drastically different results between the panels is pretty minimal, and we really don't see it. So there, I've given that caveat that if they start to tell you to be careful about wanting to continue on, it's because historically the data are very consistent with each panel of 50. My thing that I want to share with everybody is we're talking about child-resistant packages. They are not child-proof. I have an alert on my system so that whenever Google has some article across the World Wide Web, I get an announcement and it tells me what the story is about. And it's so frustrating to me how many news reporters and how many people talking about child-resistant packaging call them child-proof. They're not child-proof because we know that up to 20% of the kids could get into them and it would still be child-resistant. So I think it's responsible for this industry and all of us that are in this industry to use the proper terminology, because we don't want to set the expectation of a parent that this is a safe and the kid can never get into it. Children will get into child-resistant packages. They will certainly get into them if left alone for significantly longer than 10 minutes, and a certain percentage will get into even a properly closed. So we want to make sure that parents are smart and they don't expect too much from a child-resistant package. So now I'll get off my soapbox and we'll start talking about the senior panel. So that's how we test the children. Now we'll talk about how we test the senior panel. I often have people ask me why it matters if a senior can open or not close, because their target market might not be seniors. Well, the bottom line is that the concept that we're testing is a substance, and the regulations are for substances, not necessarily the package. So the senior has to be able to properly close the package, because if they don't properly close it, then the child-resistant feature is not engaged. So it's really what we're testing is the daily use of the package to make sure that when seniors open and close it, that it still remains child-resistant. Similar to how the child panels are defined, the senior panels are also very specific as to who can participate. And again, even though it's difficult to find the exact right ages and the other criteria for the sites and the tester restrictions, it's very important because it makes the panel reproducible and it makes the data reproducible. Again, the seniors are limited to being exposed to the same ASTM type, because we want to make sure that they don't have learning going on during the testing process. So they also re-record to make sure that they're testing different ASTM types. To start the testing off, we are requesting help from a normal adult. And as I told you, we define normal as somebody who can open and close regular packaging. We ask them to read and sign a consent form. Since the passage of the international standards, we have edited our consent form so it includes the questions that are necessary for the international standard as well. We say to them, I'm going to ask you to open and properly close these two identical packages according to the instructions found, and we tell them where those instructions are found. And as I said, most of the time they're on the package, but sometimes if you're in the developmental stage, it might be on a separate piece of paper. If they stop, the only thing we can say is, are you finished with that package or would you like to try again? And we encourage them to try because they do have 5 minutes to attempt to open the first package. 5 minutes is a very long time. The vast majority of senior adults will not continue trying for 5 minutes. But the goal of having such a long first exposure is that new packaging does require some learning curve. So the goal here is to get them through that learning curve. If it's a reclosable package, then we say to them, please empty some of the contents into a container. And then we ask them to close the package if it can be closed. The value of having them empty some contents is that not only does it empty it for the child, it also gives us an opportunity for them to stop, empty, remind them that there's ingredients or harmful substance in the package, and hopefully they will close it properly. After they open and close the package and we take it from them, then we hand them a second package, and everything is repeated except this time they only get 60 seconds to open it. And again, the purpose of this is they have now gone through the learning curve, they should understand how to open and close it, and they're given a shorter amount of time. And we add together the seconds to open and the seconds to close to calculate that 60-second threshold. And then they rate the ease of opening it. The ease of opening is only used for our clients, so they have some idea of the perception of the senior and their attitude toward the package. And then if, in fact, they don't open that first package, at this point, we give them regular packaging to make sure that they are classified as normal. And if they're not successful with regular packaging, we then admit that we shouldn't have asked them to participate in the first place, and they are excluded from the panel, and their failure does not count in the calculation. So calculating failures for seniors is rather straightforward. If they can't open the package after 5 minutes, then that's definitely a failure. And if they don't open and close, if it needs to be closed, if they don't open and close the second package in 1 minute, then that's also a failure. If it's just a unit dose and it requires only opening, then they have the 60 seconds just to open it. So on our single dose, they only have to open it in 60 seconds. And the calculation is out of 100, and that's the senior adult use effectiveness calculation. The reclosable is a little bit different, and I just want to clarify because it's important to know whether or not the package is considered reclosable and if it needs a verification by the children to see if it was closed correctly. So packages that are closed, and it's obvious from looking at it or from the audible sound, then that is a determination made by the tester that it was closed. However, if it's a continuous thread, or if you look at the package and you can't see or hear anything that indicates to you that it was closed, then the children have to assess whether or not it's closed. And that's when we do a resecuring test. The resecuring test calculation includes both the seniors who failed and the children who failed. And that statistic of pass level is also at 90%. So when we originally talk to you about the pricing, we will typically ask if you have a reclosable package that's obviously closed or a reclosable package in which a child test is needed to determine if it's closed correctly. The next few slides talk about calculating the senior adult use effectiveness if a child panel is needed to determine if the package is closed correctly. So that's what we'll go over as this part in the red here. So I have 3 different examples because last time I had people questioning the mathematics to get to the pass rate. So I thought I would try and do it a little bit more slowly this time. And if anyone has any questions, be sure after I talk about it for the next 3 slides, you ask us when we get to the Q&A part and we will review it again. So let's say that when we start with our 100 seniors, that we have none of them that failed, which means they all opened and properly closed the package. So this is a good thing. So because of this, that they were all successful, we have 100 packages that we can give to the children. When we give them to the children, let's assume that 20 children opened the package. Now remember that we've said all along that they're child-resistant packages, and it's acceptable if some children get into them because we know even the best packages are not child-proof. So in this particular case, we allow 20% of the children, or 20% of the packages opened by the children fall into the acceptable range. So since we started with 100, that means the first 20 are acceptable. Then we look at it and we say, let's say there's 0 children who are able to open it and 0 seniors who are able to or 0 seniors who failed, then our actual calculation is 100% because we didn't have an excessive number of children open it. So even though 20 children got into it, it's in that acceptable range, and we have 100% SAUE, Senior Adult Use Effectiveness. So what we've proven here is that it matches one of the 2 thresholds. It matches, or it meets the Senior Use Effectiveness threshold. Another scenario would be, what happens if 10 seniors don't open it? Now we're sort of on the brink here because it just barely passes. So now we only have 90 packages to give to the children because we already have 10 failures that we're dealing with. We still have 20% of the children are able to open it and fall in the acceptable range. But now that only leaves us 18 children because 20% of 90 allows us to have 18 children. So now let's say that 20 children do open the package. So it's the same number of children, but we're combining it with the problem we had with the seniors. And now we've got 2 children who fall into that failure calculation. So we've got those 10 seniors who were unsuccessful, and we have 2 children who failed, and now I have 12 failures. So I have an 88% passing, which we know isn't going to cut it because that puts us in the 90%, below our 90%. So, I don't know what sound that was, but I'll continue on. So let's say now we have a little bit of a more complicated process of figuring it out. We have 3 seniors who don't open the package, so now we're down to 97 packages to give to the children, but we have 27 children who open the package. So if we run through our same calculation, there's 97 packages given to the kids. We're going to get 20% of them, 20% of the openings fall into our acceptable range. But we've got 27 children who opened, so we've got too many that opened it. So we have to start adding all of our child failures together and our senior failures together, and now we have 10.6 failures, which means we're down to an 89.4. The pass rate's 90, so we have a problem here. We did not pass. So this requires a reworking of the directions, or potentially we have to figure out why is it that we have this failure rate. Now I keep talking about the 2 thresholds. You have to be child resistant and senior friendly, which in most cases requires you to do 2 tests. One to make sure you're child resistant and one to make sure that the seniors can open and close it correctly. Sometimes you can do a senior panel with the reclosing, and sometimes your package performs so well that not only do you meet the threshold of being senior friendly, but you also meet the threshold of being child resistant. The way we calculate this is, let's say that we gave 100 seniors the packages and 7 of them fail. Now we've got 93 packages to give to the kids, which, as I keep saying, 20% of them are within that acceptable range. But in this particular case, we've got a package that performs extremely well. And let's say that only 5 children are able to open it. So I only have 5 failures at the child level, and I've got 7 failures at the senior level. So my SAUE is 93%, which is great. I can also use the same data to prove that I'm also child resistant, because I only have 5 child failures. And let's just say in the extreme worst case scenario, I actually had the 7 packages that the seniors failed. Let's say they made it into the hands of the kid because they were just barely closed. I would only have 12 failures. So a panel of 100 gives me only 12 failures in that second 5 minutes, and that's a passing level. So when we're working with you, we will show you where you are with the SAUE. We'll tell you where you are with the child, and we will make sure that if one test allows you to pass both thresholds, we'll make sure that we don't do any additional testing. I know it gets a little bit confusing at this point, especially if you're not used to doing it, but we give you the statistics as we move along and try and help you understand if you're going to meet one or both thresholds with your testing. So the math lesson is over. Let's go to something a little bit more common sense. The package preparation. When we're doing the testing for the seniors, all the shelf packaging is removed, all the tamper-evident materials are removed, etc. Tamper-evident materials are not child-resistant. So we encourage you to put on the cap and the tamper-evident materials as you would in the production line. That gives us the most appropriate packaging to test, because sometimes the tamper-evident materials interfere with how the child-resistant features survive the production process. However, when the testing begins, the timer starts when the shelf packaging and the tamper-evident materials are removed. The other part of the package prep that we talk about is that the caps have to be applied at the same on torque as what you think will happen in the packaging line. We assemble them 72 hours ahead of time, or we ask that you assemble them 72 hours ahead of time, because it allows the cap to take a set. This is especially appropriate for the two-piece push and turn packaging. And then we want to discuss with you if cycling is needed, because remember, it has to be child resistant for the life of the product. Sometimes tools are used to open packaging. We're most familiar with scissors being used to open some kind of a pouch. If the tool is available with the package at retail, so if you create something very clever and you have a package that a tool is needed and it's a unique tool that you sell with your package, that tool is also given to the adults and to the children. However, if the tool is pictured, such as in my diagram, but you don't give it to the person when they buy it, such as a pair of scissors, you expect them to have it at home. We do put scissors on the table for the adult to use, but children are not given the scissors. And the assumption here is that the children are not going to have access to scissors in their own home. So we're trying to, again, replicate what's in the home. But if the tool is sold with the package, it's very likely that the tool would be kept with the package, and therefore the child would have easy access to it. The instructions, as we've said, the instructions available with the package have to be given to the respondents. And if some of the additional opening directions are on the outer box, we are able to give that to the senior to use. And it's very important that if it's a prototype, that any kind of instruction we use that is not going to be the final has to look like the final, because we're trying again to replicate the marketplace. The number of packages that we need for a senior panel. If you remember how the senior panel is done, they get the first package, they're given 5 minutes, and they get a second brand new package, and they're given 60 seconds. So we need a full 200 units for the seniors. And then for the children, each one of them gets their own package, and the little star there is for the toxic dose. So if you make the assumption that it would take 2 pouches before a child gets a toxic dose, then they are given 2 pouches, which means we need enough for each child to get a toxic dose, which might be 2 or 3 packets. Plus, we give that demonstration that I told you about, so we need to have a pouch for us to do the demonstration. Since the children are tested in pairs, a panel of 50 children requires us to have 25 demos, as well as enough packages for each of the children. So, at this point, you should all be experts at how the testing is done, but the regulations were written way back in the early 70s, so there's a lot of activity that has taken place in the marketplace that requires interpretation, and that's why we always have some questions. So I'm going to share with you the questions that have been asked to us repeatedly over the years, and I'm going to have John from the CPSC respond, or I will respond. And if we don't answer fully enough, please be sure to ask, and we'll go through any other questions that you have. John, are you on the phone yet?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. So if you don't like my answer, you can get it from John, or I think most people rather hear it from you. So we are asked repeatedly about bracketing because many of you make multiple sizes of the same, that have the exact same caps. So John, do you want to give the CPSC perspective on bracketing?
Sure. We do allow bracketing as long as everything material-wise is the same, so you're not changing the bottle material, you're not changing the closure material and such. An example would be if you made a 20, a 24, and a 28 millimeter cap. And we would suggest you test the extremes, in that case, the 20 and the 28, and then you could infer from passing results for the 20 and 28 that the 24 millimeter would also pass.
Okay.
And because we require certification, you on your certificate would put the test data for the 20 and the 28 data, and you know, have the results there, and indicate that this is a 24 millimeter size, of course.
Okay. After our last presentation, somebody said, "Where is that in writing?"
It's not in writing. That's staff's interpretation.
And will it ever be in writing?
Probably not.
Okay. So that's going to be my answer. It's what the staff has interpreted. And then our job as a testing agency is that we will put in our report the sizes that you want covered with the test. So if we test the smallest and the largest, then we will refer in our test that we did the smallest and the largest, and you're using these results to cover the middle. So it's important that you let us as your testing agency know if you are going to bracket any other sizes.
The certification requirements, because this is not a children's product where testing regimes are spelled out and such, require that a manufacturer use a reasonable testing program. And that's why that bracketing will not appear in writing, because we don't mandate to manufacturers what constitutes a reasonable testing program.
Okay, so the next question that we're always asked is if they have to retest if materials are changed or if manufacturers are changed.
And once again, we say in our testing and certification that when a material change is made in the product, and again, if you changed materials, that would be a material change, a significant change, because you've gone from what has been tested to something that hasn't been tested. That could be something as easy as going from, say, a plastic to a glass container, but I've also seen different plastics presenting different performance. So if you have a package that has a polypropylene closure and it's been tested on a high-density polyethylene bottle, and you switch to a low-density polyethylene bottle, I'm aware of an instance when that did change the results dramatically for the tests that were conducted.
Okay. And then I did have a question that popped up. I'll ask it now to make sure we have time. Is an outer package like a clamshell ever considered to be a child-resistant feature?
It depends. If the clamshell is the immediate package, then it would be the child-resistant feature. If there is a product contained within that clamshell that is considered the immediate package, then no, the clamshell is not the child-resistant feature.
Okay. And this is my 2 cents worth. The EPA looks at primary and secondary packaging differently. So if the question is referring to something that's regulated by the EPA, such as Spot On or something like that, their interpretation is different. So I'll just throw that out there. But the CPSC interpretation is that it's the primary package, in essence, the thing closest to touching the harmful substance.
Right. That's what we call the immediate package.
Okay. The next is just more of a reiteration. The package preparation must be documented, as we said before. We do encourage you that if you're going to have an induction seal, we encourage you to have the induction seal put on and then the cap put on, just as it would come off your line. We have seen the induction seal interfere with the opening and or closing of a cap. We also have seen that if the induction seal doesn't nest correctly and it's not peeled off correctly, that causes a problem. If you have an induction seal, then when we test the seniors, we ask the seniors to open the package, remove the seal, pour out a little of the contents, and then close it correctly. So that gives you the most real-life scenario. John, any comment on that?
No, I would agree. You should document fully the package preparation.
Okay. Testing can stop when it appears to be failing. Yes, we keep you appraised of the test results almost daily. And if we feel that it is not trending the proper way, then we will immediately let you know. We will try and discuss with you whether we think it is a physical design problem or the directions are not clear, etc., or it's a quality issue. If, in fact, there's random response among the children, some get it off right away, some don't get it off at all, we absolutely have found that those are quality issues, and it's typically in the manufacturing of prototypes as opposed to production, because as we keep saying, that the test results are quite consistent across children. So real dramatic changes are typically due to something odd. But we'll keep you appraised, and yes, you can stop. The sequential panels are what I described of 50, 100, 150, and 200. If you're passing at 50, you can stop. That is not considered a shortcut. That is an official threshold. International standards, you can stop at 30, but we always test to 50 because you have to meet the CPSC regulations, and then you're just kind of overkill on the international, which is preferable. But then I go back to what Deb and Jan keep wanting me to say. If you see sequential panels and you see yourself falling in that barely passing range, there are no miracles. You're not going to automatically have a panel of kids who are not able to get into it. So we very rarely at Great Lakes, we very rarely have found that on child panels we need to go into the third or fourth panel. If you haven't passed with 100 children, that's typically an indication that you don't have the best option that's available, and we'll let you know that. But the data that we've been collecting over the past 10 years or so, very, very rarely is there a need to go into those 100 and 200 panel sizes. Can testing be done outside the U.S.? Yes, it can, but John, they want to hear that from you.
Yes, you can test outside the U.S. as long as the testing facility follows the protocols in 16 CFR 1700.20. I would, as Lori alluded to a few moments ago about the international standards, bear in mind that the CPSC does not accept testing that is done in accordance with the international standards. Because, as she said, that the number of children can be smaller in some circumstances, and the command that a child may use their teeth, if they haven't already done so, is not given in the international standards. So if you do an ISO test, that would not be acceptable to CPSC. You'll have to retest according to our protocols.
Okay. Resecuring and a child panel. As I showed you mathematically, it is possible to do a resecuring panel and still meet the thresholds for a child panel. I will not bore anybody with those numbers again, but if you do not meet the child panel thresholds, then yes, you do need to have supporting research to show that it is child resistant as well as senior friendly. We already talked about the need for testing seniors, and I will reiterate that it's really important that the seniors can use your package effectively. Otherwise, they won't use it correctly, and then you've got harmful substances in the household, and they are not in secured packaging. International standards, John just said, and that is the standard that we use is we test a CPSC, and then we also add additional requirements that allow it to also meet the international standards, such as we always go to a panel 50 and we monitor how many times a child has tested a package, which is also a requirement in ISO, and we have the 2 additional questions on the senior consent form. So if there's additional questions on those standards, be sure to put that in the chat box. ASTM, sometimes we have people say, do you test to the ASTM standards? We test to 16 CFR. ASTM has classified packages into categories. So we use the ASTM classifications so that we can make sure that a child or a senior adult is not exposed to 2 packages within the same classification. So that's why you see and hear us use that terminology. But we are testing to 16 CFR 1700. Third-party testing. Yes, we're a third party, but third-party testing is not required. And John, again, they got to hear that from you.
No, anyone can conduct the testing as long as they follow the protocol that's specified in 16 CFR 1700.20.
A question came in. It says, why not use separate packages for the adult and child testing rather than giving the children the package that the adult already opened? I gave my best at that one, John. I think maybe you might be able to.
No, I think you're correct. If you've got a package that you can be certain a child, or can be certain, I'm not a child, an adult has properly reclosed, either visually by looking at it, say if you had to line up the arrows and they were no longer aligned, then you could be certain that was properly closed. If it was a package that gave you an audible click, you could be certain about that. But there's certain packages you just cannot tell that the adults have properly closed them, and you need to conduct the resecuring test, as Lori mentioned.
Okay, another question. Do you need to do a senior testing on products that seniors will never use, such as birth control?
Well, that's easy. Birth control pills, if they're in a mnemonic pack, they don't need to be in special packaging. There's an exemption for them. But not wanting to sidestep that question, a senior test is required for products that would enter a household, because you never know who's going to be in that household. I understand, from the statistics I'm reading nowadays, more and more people are staying with their parents. So just because a senior purchases that product doesn't mean that they'll be the exclusive user of it.
Okay, so the short answer is yes, regardless of who the target market is. If it is a regulated substance, it needs to be in child-resistant packaging, and it needs to be tested with seniors.
Correct.
Okay. Another question that has come up is, do labs have to be accredited? No, just like third-party testing is not needed. Testing labs do not need to be accredited. We are accredited. We feel that that process is really helpful for us because they really evaluate everything you do, but you do not have to be accredited. The CPSC has on their website a list of labs. Some are accredited, some are not, but just because they're listed on the CPSC website does not mean the CPSC endorses them. The CPSC does not endorse any of us. So.
Yeah, and we don't do accreditation either.
Okay, and then the last formal question we keep asking, should I send the CPSC the report? John, I'll let you answer that one also.
We have a provision that we ask that samples of packaging be sent to us. We would request that you would enclose the test report with it, just as a matter of protection for yourself. When you send information to CPSC, I would mark that as business confidential, just to ensure that if there is ever a FOIA request, that information not get out. Normally it doesn't, but like any other kind of bureaucracy, mistakes can happen, so I would ensure that. A good reason for sending the data to us is if there is ever a problem with your product or your package and we get inquiries, that saves us a step because we can see that testing has already been done on that. We still might give you a call to see if you've gotten any additional reports, but it saves a step.
Okay. A question came in, what is a typical lead time for testing, best case and worst case? We're testing all day, every day. So when we get your package, we try and enter it in. But if you can give us a week to let us know it's coming, we'd appreciate it. The typical way to start the process is you can email us and say, hey, I've got a package I want tested. We will send you the cost, and we'll also send you what we call a setup form, and it will ask you for the details of your package and how you're going to prepare the package, and it gives us a chance to ask you questions to make sure that you're preparing the package the right way. We will ask you what the directions are, where they're going to be located. It'll also give us a chance to make sure that that part is done correctly. And then you would send us the packages. If we are assembling them, remember that we need to let them rest for 3 days. So we're not even going to be able to start testing until the cap has been torqued down and rested. So that's the process. So I definitely, as I said earlier, I would give yourself 4 to 6 weeks to have the whole process done. And if we could have a week lead time, that would be fantastic. There's another question. CR cap suppliers supply their test results. Can we use these and avoid retesting? John?
Yes. Actually, if you go to the CPSC website and look for the testing and certification, we do have actually this posted saying that a manufacturer can rely on, and when I say manufacturer, I'm talking about the person who introduces a regulated substance into packaging rather than the packaging manufacturer. So the manufacturer that introduces a regulated substance into a product can rely on the test from that container's manufacturing as a basis for their certification.
All right, and then
I'm sorry, provided that everything, is identical. The materials are the same and such.
Okay, and then another question was, have you seen any trends in child exposures?
We see exposures every year. Lately, we have, as the media has reported, we've seen a lot of exposures with laundry packets, but that's not a regulated substance, but that's still something to bear in mind. But as far as any one product, I can't think of any emerging trend that's caught our eye.
Okay. Can you cite a reference or a document for establishing a toxic dose, i.e. the failure level?
There isn't a document that would establish a toxic dose. When a firm is testing and they wish to establish an F level, they should consult with CPSC. We will consult with our health sciences group, and we will review your F level. We will not set one for you. An F level, considering the number of different kind of substances out there, for the CPSC to try to establish an F level would be an impossibility if we tried to establish an F level for every substance. In addition, as a manufacturer, you know your product much better than we ever would.
But in the regulation, it's the half-life of a 25. What's the actual?
It's the amount of substance that would cause serious harm or injury to a 25-pound, 11.3 kilogram child. Is what what the F level would be.
Okay, so then if in our report they would just have to supply the data to show that they have that information, and that's how the F level was determined?
Well, they should first contact CPSC to make sure that that F level is mutually agreeable to us and them, and then contact you with the F level that's been determined. If they don't wish to or can't establish an F level, you can always go with F1 packaging.
Right. Okay. This is an interesting question. Picking up on your terminology of a reasonable testing program, the question is, who judges whether it's a reasonable testing program? Lawyers if you're sued? Question mark.
Well, we do have legal staff on board, so the CPSC could take action against you. Our fines have been increased now under CPSIA. We can go up to $15.15 million. That's probably still lower than what a good trial lawyer can do. So as a packaging engineer, you would have to determine whether or not the product that you put forth on the marketplace is represented by the product that was tested. And if there's any doubt in your mind, then you might want to consider retesting. If your test is from 15 years ago, and you haven't changed out your molds or whatever, and you might consider that there's some kind of wear and tear on your equipment, you may want to reconsider retesting it. If something has happened during the manufacturing process, let's say, for example, that the plant had to shut down and you had to rebuild a number of the packaging machinery or the injection molders, you may want to consider repackaging or retesting.
Along that same line, there's a question that do you have to repeat CR testing for the production tooling if you've already done it on the unit tooling?
If there is no difference between the production test tooling and the unit tooling, and you don't believe that anything in the by speeding up the line will have changed, then no. Again, this is what a reasonable person would assume. If, for example, during your initial tests, your injection molding was at one pressure, you injected the plastic at one pressure, and during production it's going to be at a different pressure, you may want to consider using your production testing, the first run of the production testing, as the items you test.
Okay. That's all the FAQs that I have. It also looks like I've caught all of those that came across in chat. If anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, we've probably got 60 seconds to do that.
I have one question. You had mentioned that during the child testing that you encourage the children to open the package. The CR testing is highly regulated, and I've seen testing at a number of sites. And one of the things I've noticed that it is different is that like your location does encourage the children. Other test sites do not. Is that just a personal judgment of whether the children should be encouraged to open the pack or not? Or is that part of the regulations?
If the package is in their hand and they're working on it, then there's nothing. If they sit idle and don't touch it at all, then the tester is supposed to say, please continue to try.
Okay.
All right. John, did you have any comment on that?
No, I would say that there's really no encouragement other than what you said, that the child is, if they're not working on the package, they're asked to continue.
Okay. This next slide is the GCC, and we've had many ask us the General Certificate of Conformity. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see that that is the location of where this is on the CPSC website. But in red is the question, and in italic is what they are suggesting be put on that certificate. I discourage you from calling it a certificate per se, because it doesn't look like a certificate with a gold seal and a little stamp, but in essence it's more of a document, and we provide for you where it says the place it was tested. We provide that information for you, and the third-party lab, and that's again where it's stated that you don't have to have third-party testing, but if you do, then we supply that information for you. But in essence, these certificates or these documents are created by the manufacturers or the distributors, and you are responsible for having this available so that if it is requested, you have it available. Many companies have a location on their website for these documents, and that's what we encourage people to do. But we can provide you the information for what goes in there, but you are responsible for creating and keeping this document.
And I would just add, Lori, that once again, the certificate, when we say a manufacturer, that is for CPSC's purposes, that is the person who introduces a regulated substance into the packaging.
Right. Oh, could you quickly discuss for the people who make only the package and they put nothing inside of it, whether or not they need to test?
They really don't need to test, but in order for anybody to buy your package, they probably are going to want to see a test to make sure that your package does indeed work. You could provide them with a certificate, but they have to reissue their own certificate because you really wouldn't know what they were going to put into your package. So, for example, if you had Al's Aspirin Company buying bottles from Bob's Bottles, Al would need to issue a certificate stating that the package indeed had been tested and such. He could rely on the data from Bob, but Al would need to issue his own certificate.
Okay. And then there was another question. I think you've answered this, but it's always helpful to hear again. If minor changes to the structural design are required to a reclosable unit dose package after successful completion of testing, does it require retesting? I.e., there was no change in the overall dimension and the position of the product is the same.
Well, once again, it's going to be, what's a reasonable testing program. If you feel that any changes made would not impact its child resistance performance or the senior friendliness requirements, then fine. Then no. If it's a bigger change and you feel it might impact the performance, you're always free to call us and we can discuss it with you.
Okay.
Oh, I would also mention that when you're certifying your package, you're certifying it to the performance specifications of 16 CFR Part 17, 1700.15. You're not really certifying it to the testing protocol.
To the protocol, right. So it's to the standard.
Correct.
Okay. The CPSC contacts are on your screen, so if you want to contact them. And as I've said before, sometimes people don't want to call the CPSC because they're mean. So sometimes clients have asked me to contact John on their behalf. And even though he's not very mean, I'm more than happy to contact him on your behalf.
That's fine. We're not at all mean.
And then if you've got any questions, you're always welcome to give me a holler. As I said, we will put the presentation on our website. Feel free to take a peek at that or pass it on. And, oh, here's one more question. Is child-resistant testing required for packages containing combination products, such as a syringe or pen?
We don't. Our regulation for prescription medication says prescriptions intended for oral administration.
Okay.
So syringes would not fall under our jurisdiction.
What if in that package there's also, though, a substance that is a regulated substance? Then it does need to be tested.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Super. If anyone has any other questions, please email me. I will, or email John, either one. Thank you all very much for helping us share information. I hope it was useful, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And John, thank you very much for taking the time to answer questions.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting us.
Take care. Bye.